Okay, so we are planning for a lesson next Friday, and what are your goals for this lesson that you will be teaching next Friday?
Goals for this lesson is that the students will be able to comprehend and understand 8.5a, which is proportionality with slope in the form of y equals kx, and making sure that each student stays on task and finishes and follows instructions thoroughly.
Okay, so you want them to learn about proportionality, representations of proportionality, and then that's the goal for what you're teaching, and the students are going to learn, and then you want to make sure that the students are more
Staying on task,
that
yes.
they're staying on task. And then, do you have plans? What are your What are your goals for helping them stay on task?
I plan on splitting them up into purposeful grouping. That way they're able to work with each other as they're doing their work instead of just hanging out with their friends and talking and disrupting class and not doing what they're supposed to.
Okay, so most of the time right now you just let them randomly group
Yeah.
versus purposeful
Yeah.
grouping.
I've kind of let them pick their groups and let them go about their business, but I feel like purposeful grouping will help in this instance. That way they're able to help each other and feed off each other. For those that know something and others might know, and those that don't know might help the others with something they know.
Okay, so you feel like the purposeful grouping will help
Mm-hmm.
them stay on task. It sounds like you think they're not on task sometimes because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, how will you know that the students have learned that you're successful? That the students have learned the proportionality representations and that you have achieved your goal of them.
So since I'm grouping them up in like groups of four, I plan on having four different questions as a formative assessment at the end of class as I walk around and ask each individual kid a different question. Make sure that they're able to answer it by themselves without help of another student. That way I know that they understand it completely themselves.
Okay, and so what will the other students be doing while you're?
The other students will still be completing their independent practice amongst the group.
Okay, so you're starting like far enough in advance before the
Mm.
end of class
Yeah.
that you'll have enough time, and they're still have the other kids all
They'll
have
still have
something to
time.
do.
They'll all have something to do that they'll need to finish because this worksheet will be, or this independent practice will be due at the end of class.
Okay, and then you said something else, but maybe it'll come back to me. Something else I wanted to ask you, but it'll come back to me. So you'll know that they learned it from your formative assessment, and then your goal is to hopefully use the purposeful grouping to keep them on task. And obviously, how will you know that you're successful at that?
Um, I'll know that I'm successful, that I made sure that they were on task and completed their assignments by completing their assignment that they're given. If they're able to complete the whole independent practice, and they should be able, that means that they stayed on task most of the class, if not all of the class, to get it done.
Okay, so if they completed their task,
And if they
then
completed
most
the
likely
task, then most
they
likely it
stay
took,
on task.
yeah.
And then obviously, what are some informal ways that you would know that they stayed on task?
Just walk, talk, checking, making sure like the students are doing what they're supposed to and not talking about what they're going to do tomorrow night or this and that.
Right,
Just observing the class as they go.
exactly. I was going to say just regular class observations, probably. All right, and then what might be some strategies you've considered if they're off task?
Um, if they're off task, then I may have to just verbal warning, or just walk. Being close to them, they usually get back to work. Usually, when the teacher's around them, they tend not to get off task. So, if I have a group that tends to want to get off task, then I'll move closer towards them so they know that I hear them, then they're not doing what they're supposed to. So maybe they'll get back to work.
Okay, so using proximity.
Proximity, yeah. That's the word I
And
was
then,
looking for.
right. Proximity. And then what if that doesn't work?
If that doesn't work, then I'll end up having to split the group up and just move them amongst other groups where I know that they may fit a little better to make sure that they're doing their work. Um,
And you said that you had mentioned to me that when you try to move them, they don't like moving and they kind of throw a fit and act out, and it causes a little bit of a ruckus when you move them. So what's your thoughts about what you're gonna do if that happens?
for the most part, I'll tell them to move, and when they start arguing with me, just kind of ignore them and tell them to move and get to where they're going. and help a student that needs help with their work instead of wasting class time arguing with them. But if it gets too big of a deal, then I'll send them out of class and have a teacher-student conference at the end of class to make sure they understand what they did was wrong.
Do you think that you could do, if possible, could you do the conference right away so the kid can come back in and get some work done?
Yeah.
It's sometimes a tendency for us, it's natural human, I think, to like get out of here. I can't look at you anymore right now. But, and then you leave them out there because you're trying to,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's better to immediately deal with it so they can come in and, of course, do their work or whatever. But
I usually do that.
I think I've seen you do that actually, but
Yeah.
I don't want the people on the other side of the video thinking that you didn't do that.
Just send them out and leave them out there.
Till eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't come back in my class ever again.
Because I've seen you immediately go on conference
Yeah.
and so I was like, I don't think that you leave them out there the whole time. All right. Any other strategies that you needed to consider as far as teaching proportionality and those
I don't know. I
the
feel
y
like
equals kx proportional
using
relationships?
visuals on the board or using different types of technology to help the students understand it in different ways. Videos usually help, or I like to draw a lot of pictures when I teach it, so I feel like that helps them a lot more.
Yeah, one thing that I want to work with all the math people with is having whatever the kids have like right here in front of them, print it into Smart Notebook and then have it up there so that whatever's up there is what they have right down here. And that really does help. Like
Yeah.
one of the high school teachers has started doing that and she sees a huge difference in her test scores and just the kids staying on task because they're not confused about what she's doing. If that makes sense. All right, so what is the most important for you to pay attention to in yourself?
To make sure that I am staying on task as well as a teacher, make sure I'm going thoroughly through our mini lesson or whatever it may be to make sure the students understand what's going on. That way when they begin independent practice, that they're able to do it themselves without being so dependent on myself.
Okay. And then the day that I'm actually observing you, how or what do you want to be sure that you do very well, thinking of the fact that your goal is to have students on task?
Make sure that I'm walking around, checking students, making sure they're on task, making sure they're completing their assignment, not just hanging out at one table. Make sure I'm walking around to each group and helping as needed as we go.
Okay. And then, but you're going to be doing that formative assessment at some point, so how can you make sure that you have time to do your formative assessment with every student? Because if you're walking around answering the questions like you did in our last time, that takes you away from a little bit, maybe you're wanting to get that individualized attention with the other kids. So you're purposeful grouping, but then what else can you do? I have something in mind, but I'm trying to get, I think you know. I'm really leading you, which I usually don't do, but like,
Purpose.
like how can you get it so you're not having to help the student so much?
I have a student leader in the group, and by planning roles or if that. So if I have a student that really catches on and knows what they're doing, have them help their group, or if their group understands it and another group doesn't, have them go help that group.
Okay. And then have you heard of C3 before me? That's what I was thinking of. By having the roles, I think
Is asking.
is very important too.
Yeah, so I do that. I just don't call it that. I have them ask their group first, and if nobody in their group knows, then they have to go to another group and ask before they can ask me.
Okay, I wondered if you did it. You just don't call it C3 before me. Okay, so you will also do that.
Yeah.
To make sure that you get through. So you want to make sure that you do that very well. And then how might you know that you're doing these things, keeping the students on task, that you're getting the formative assessment done? How are you going to know that you're doing that well?
I'll know that I'm doing it well, that each student's able to complete the formative assessment correctly. If they need help, I can walk them step by step, or if they know how to do it, then they're able to do it and I can move on. I'll really be able to tell when they take the summative assessment and I can see their test scores to see if it helped them by doing it this way versus just kind of letting them go on their own and not walking around and doing a formative assessment with them.
Okay, so from the formative assessment and the summative assessment, it sounds like that's how you're going to know that you did things well, so they learned. So the students are learning the proportionality. And then how can you know let's talk a little bit about them staying on task. Since I'm going to be in there observing you, and that's what we're planning for, what could I do possibly for you so that you have data that I've collected, so you've achieved students staying on task?
Maybe keep a chart every time, or a tally every time you see a student get off task and stay off task, and I don't monitor it. Keep a mark, and then keep marks for every time that I do interact with someone that is off task, and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
All right, so I'll keep a chart, and I'll make a mark for when they're off task and a mark for when they're on task, when students are on task, or that you did something maybe efficiently to get them back on task. Because if I'm marking everybody who's on task, I might sit there. Hopefully, I'm going to be so busy marking everybody.
So many marks.
Because everybody's going to be on task, of course.
Yeah,
sure,
totally.
This is going to work. It's the miracle cure. All right, so how has this conversation? Oh, I finally thought of the one thing. What about? Are you going to inform the students? Because you're going to. At the end, you're going to see if they understand what they're doing. Are you going to inform them ahead of time so they're like, oh, I better figure this out before he gets to me? Are they going to know that you're going to be doing that toward the end of class, or are you going to make that a surprise? What do you think is the best idea?
I feel like letting them know is better. That way they're asking somebody for help sooner than later. That way they're understanding it before I get to them. So
I agree. Sometimes there's a place for a surprise factor, but I tend
that's
to.
not on a new subject. That's not where you need to surprise the students.
I agree with that. It doesn't mean we're both right, but I do agree with that. Okay, so as you reflect on this conversation, how has it supported your learning, and how might you incorporate this process into your own thinking?
I think that it's allowed me to understand my groups, determine how my class is going to go. Like, besides just letting them pick their own group, by putting them in purposeful grouping, I feel like that it may help the class structure a little more than it normally is.
And have we worked you through some details maybe that you didn't think of before?
Yeah. I feel like going step by step through this, it allows me to focus on what I need to get done and what are some steps that I can do to accomplish the goal that I'm looking for.
And can you name something specifically you thought of during this conversation that maybe you didn't think you wouldn't have thought of before?
I guess the asking groups, it's just kind of a routine thing, or setting roles in my groups. I guess it's kind of routine, just put them in groups and let them go, but setting roles, so I make sure that each student has responsibility so that I know that each student's actually working and it's not just all relying on one student.
And then what about what if they are off task? Like, thinking that through, do you always think through that to the detail of, okay, what if this happens, then what if this happens? What am I going to do? Do you think of that usually?
No, it's usually on the fly, so I feel like this may have helped a little more so I can process it a little quicker when the situation does happen, so I'll know how to react so that it works purposefully in class so students are staying on task.
I think that classroom management is the hardest thing to think of ahead of time, because I think we all just hope and pray that, today's going to be a good day.
Class,
right?
Yeah.
Today's going to be the perfect
There's
day.
no such thing as an angel class.
And then it doesn't happen. It's almost like we're surprised.
Yeah.
But to think through that ahead of time of that's and eventually that would come naturally once you think it through several times.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to add?
No, ma'am.
All good? All right.
Good.
Thanks.